Eric Parker this morning on CT21. A budget is passed. Sports betting gets the go-ahead, but legalizing marijuana remains up in the air. This morning, we're summing up the session and looking at what could happen when the legislature reconvenes in the next few weeks. And the eviction moratorium lifts at the end of this month. So what does that mean for landlords and for tenants who owe them back rent? And in today's Sunday Spotlight, helping the homeless one bicycle at a time, we're talking with the Hartford police officer behind that effort. It's all this Sunday, June 13th. CT21 starts right now.
From Channel 3, this is Connecticut's most watched current affairs program, CT21, with Eric Parker, sponsored by Hartford Healthcare.
Good morning. The legislative session for 2021 wrapped up on Wednesday. There were a few fireworks in the final days. We're going to hear from both Republicans and Democrats this morning about what was accomplished in that session that started way back on January the 6th. We begin this morning with House Speaker Matt Ritter. Representative Ritter, thank you for being with us. So a budget is passed. A lot of things were accomplished. What do you say to just the average Joe voter who's maybe just reading newspaper headlines, not following closely? What should they know about what you guys did up at the legislature this year?
I mean, a couple of things. I think historic investments in our urban areas, in healthcare, and earned income tax credit that went up to the highest in the history of the state of Connecticut to 30.5. So really, to me, relief for middle class and working families. At the same time, no new taxes. We were able to do a budget on time and provide the services we want and keep our revenue flat, basically.
There was a lot of support, even some Republicans signing on to the budget, many Republicans signing on to the budget as it passed. But there were some in your own party who felt that more should be done, that this was an opportunity with the economy being what it is despite the pandemic, that this was an opportunity to make some historic change. Senator from Forest said that he felt that by not taking advantage of that and raising some taxes, he called it a knee on the neck of the black community. Those are some pretty strong words from within your own party. What do you say to those people who wanted to see even more accomplished?
I can't speak to other people's thought process on the budget. What I can tell you is I represent a 97-person caucus that is as diverse as the state of Connecticut. It has urban areas, rural areas, suburban areas. And I can tell you that every single person in my caucus voted for the budget. That's probably my response to that.
So it's something, obviously, you want to be building some consensus, and it certainly appears that you did there. One other thing, we saw a lot of funding for cities and a change to how some of those funds, it's called pilot funds, which is probably a little wonky for some of our viewers, but it's a big deal if you're putting together a budget in a place like New Haven or Hartford. Tell us about that change. I know Mayor Elliker down in New Haven said it was cause for celebration in his city.
Yes, Mayor Elliker called me early this morning to thank me as well for that. I mean, look, for a long time, people have wondered why are Hartford and New Haven struggling? And the reason is because we haven't fully funded the pilot, which is just reimbursing them for tax-exempt property, hospitals, colleges, universities, things like that. Hartford, for example, will get about $20 million in extra money, help keep the mill rate flat, and lower property taxes, which is the most regressive tax we have in the state. We also created a Connecticut Investment Fund, which I do want to talk about. 5 years, $3 billion. 125 million in federal funds a year, 175 in state bonded funds a year to target investment in our poorest areas. It's a really unique concept.
Mr. Speaker, one thing that did not get done before the final gavel was this recreational marijuana bill. What are the prospects for that going forward? You're anticipating a special session to deal with that now?
Yeah, not too far from, maybe it's this week, maybe it's the week after, but we will legalize cannabis in the coming weeks. We would have done it on Wednesday. My counterparts on their side wanted to talk it till midnight, and that's their right. That's their choice. We'll just come back in a few days and do it.
Obviously, you don't become the Speaker of the House without being pretty good at politics. And you made clear in those final hours that a special session at their own risk, that there could be other bills brought up as well. Are there things that you're thinking about at this point, or you're going to be feeling that out as we move forward?
We'll feel it out. I mean, we have a SB 5, Senate Bill 5 was a big election issue, for example. That will go in the budget implementer. Look, I think you have some new people on both sides who don't understand that, the clock running out is the friend if you are against legislation. So to reset the clock, I think, was not a good strategy. I don't think that was what the more veteran members, perhaps, of the other side wanted to do. But that's okay. We'll go back in and we'll get it done.
Now, we've talked a lot about that recreational marijuana bill, and we know there was a bill that you may have been able to bring to the floor for a vote had there not been that opposition. For people out there who have been following this, who may be interested in this process, are we, from your perspective, are we pretty much there? What we have is what's going to come up in special session, or do you anticipate more changes?
No, I think it's what we have. I mean, I've read that there might be some minor modifications, which people are always open to ideas, but I think it is substantially final form. That'll be the bill. And then it's a very quick process. We have regulations get drafted immediately. And my guess is you'll see sales sometime next spring, next summer.
All right, we only have a few seconds left, but from your position there with your caucus and dealing with all these bills, you get through a session, is it a time to take a breath or is it just on to the next?
Well, we haven't finished the budget implementer, right? So we got to go back in. Certainly we're all tired, but we'll get everything done in about mid to late June, which is great. And then we can all enjoy our summers. And hopefully we're past the pandemic, which is wonderful, and spend time with our families like the rest of the state. All
right. Speaker of the House, Representative Matt Ritter, we appreciate you being with us on this Sunday morning, and we'll, of course, be watching for news on that special session coming up. Also this morning, we want to talk about how the Republicans are feeling about the session. For that, we turn to State Senator Kevin Kelly. He's from the 21st District. He's the Senate Republican leader. So, Senator Kelly, we just talked to the Speaker of the House. He said he felt largely it was a successful session. Do you agree?
I do think it was largely successful. We came into this under the cloud of COVID, and it was certainly, heartening to see that when it came to the budget, the Democrats started with the governor. That's how the process goes, proposing $630 million of new taxes. The majority in the Appropriation Committee came out with $3.2 billion of more taxes, and then the progressive left wanted, over $4 billion. So you had groups that wanted taxes, more taxes, and the most taxes negotiating this budget. But, the Republicans, instead of negotiating, went to the streets and took their message with tax rallies across the state. We got 12,000 signatures on petitions, took to the airwaves and social media, and got the middle class voice into that building, despite the fact that we were operating under COVID. And those voices were heard. And as a result, we ended up with a budget that had no new taxes.
Obviously, being a Republican leader in the state of Connecticut can sometimes, especially up at the State House, be a bit of an uphill battle. But you voted yes on that budget. Was it something that, you just got to a point where you said, this is something that my constituents will support? Was it you got enough of the things you didn't like out of it? I'm sure you don't love all of it like anyone, but how did you get to that process? And I saw on your website, you said, hey, listen, I voted yes, and put out a news release about that.
Well, hey, we looked at it, and in my comments on the floor, I said everybody in the Senate has to look at this from their own district's perspective and evaluate whether or not this works for their constituents. I mean, I think what's important is what's not in the budget. We don't have a gas tax. We don't have a mansion tax, which is really a tax on homes of $300,000 or more. We don't have a commercial property tax. We don't have a health insurance tax. There's no public option. I think we accomplished a lot of things. We also were able to utilize the Republican ECS formula, which changed educational funding from political to the decisions in financing based on students' needs. And not only did we hold all the towns harmless, but we actually added to that. And for those reasons, I thought, for my district, it worked.
I asked the speaker about discontent within his own party. I'll ask you the same thing. Senator Sampson said because fees for credit card charges, the deposit on nip bottles and the increase in deposit on some other bottles, he said that the argument you're making that there's no taxes, he called it a dishonest argument. Obviously, you have people from, like you said, different districts with different constituencies. But what do you say to Republicans who say, all right, so maybe there's no taxes, but there's a lot of other stuff that still costs us more money, and we wish you wouldn't have voted for this thing?
Well, you're looking at new taxes, referring to NIPS. That was in the bottle bill. That was a separate standalone. And for the most part, you're looking at a deposit and a return type system that if a consumer puts money into the system, when they return the bottle, they get it back. And with regards to NIPS, that's a surcharge. I wasn't there that day based on a family member, but I believe most of our caucus, Republicans, at least in the House, did not support that measure. What I think also is important isn't so much, what the right or the left are talking about. It's does this work for middle and low income families? And we have to stay focused on, middle class families did not need more financial burdens coming off the COVID pandemic. What they needed was a financial break. That's why the Republicans in both the House and the Senate hit the streets, taking the no new tax message. And it's why we don't have a gas tax. We don't have a mansion tax. We don't have a consumption tax. There weren't increases in income taxes. It's because we got all those out, despite the fact that the majority Democrats had the numbers and were in negotiating and had proposals that had anywhere from $630 million to $4 billion of taxes. And to come out with a zero, I think, is a good day for the middle class.
All right, Senator Kevin Kelly, we appreciate you joining us. It has been a busy week and a busy session, and we hope to have you back on the program again. Thanks for a few minutes with you on this Sunday morning. Coming up later in our program, bicycles for the homeless. The Connecticut cop behind the effort in the capital city talks about how it's changing lives. But up next, landlords will soon be able to take action against tenants who haven't been paying their rent. We're talking about the end of the eviction moratorium with the commissioner of the Connecticut Department of Housing when we come back.